God wants us to be happy no matter what. And so if you are happy in your vocation, that's the sign that you are doing God's will.
All right, Lucio, it's so great to see you again. You're an educator teaching religion to high school students. You lead the street patrol every summer dutifully for so very long. You're very involved and always enriching your faith. But before we got here, I'd love to take it back. Take it back to the beginning of your faith journey. I'd love to know: are you a cradle Catholic, a convert, a revert? Where's your story lie with that?
Thank you, Jermaine. It's I would call it a revert because I was brought up Catholic, and it was the 1970s, and I belonged to a typical immigrant Canadian family, Italian, and our parish was very important to us because there was an Italian mass at 8 a.m. on Sundays, and my parents went to that, and I soon became an altar server and started going to all the masses, and All Saints was the parish, and All Saints School was right next to the church. And what was really interesting is that in those days, altar servers were called out to serve at funerals during the week. So it was great for me, to get out of class. I'm grade 4, grade 5, whatever, and I got to see a lot of funerals. So I got really comfortable with death, which is a bit unusual for young people. But I thought,
most kids don't ever encounter that for quite some time, and for you to be just a regular thing it's important. It is part of life and part of our journey.
Indeed, and I got to see all sorts of different funerals where the people were so well loved, the parish was packed. I got to see where it was empty, so the person must have lived a lonely life. There was a few where there were multiple caskets, so there must have been like a tragedy in the family somehow. And the worst was small caskets, so a child had died or a baby had died. Luckily, there's only a few of those. I got comfortable with death, and it was a great way to be involved in the Catholic Church. And Sundays were not boring at all for me, being up there and having all those duties. And Saturdays, we had weddings, and sometimes we got a little money on the side from the groom, which was nice. So it was great. And
how long were you an altar server for?
Basically, about, I would say, 5 years, from probably grade 4 to grade 9. So that's kind of where my faith changed, actually. It's interesting or my relationship with the church changed, because after grade 9, I was told I was too old, to be an altar server. And it just coincided with changes that were happening with me, physically, adolescence, and a change in friends, and that marked the next stage. So from the time I was very young till about 10th grade, I was really connected with my faith.
It sounds like the fact that you were able to be an altar server for so long, the fact that Saturdays and Sundays, the fact that you got pulled out of school for funerals. I never altar served. I wasn't involved with Catholic anything at that point when I was that age. So to hear that is pretty remarkable for me, to learn that that's what altar servers had to take on. So when you went from elementary and entered into high school, you were in All Saints. Did you stay in Catholic education when you went to high school?
I ended up going to...
so it's not like you... it's not like your pivot, like you went to public school and you stepped away from the faith.
No.
So what precipitated that sort of a change to, even though being in Catholic school, but having a big relationship shift?
It's a bit complicated, as adolescence is, to pinpoint exactly, why. I have an interesting theory. But first I'll talk about that. I went I went to St. Mike's College School, which is a very, very good
Okay.
school. And
Yeah.
I think one of the changes was leaving the altar service. So I kind of lost
Mm.
my identity a bit, and I felt kind of awkward going to mass because I didn't know what to do. I was up there for so many years, and I felt kind of alone,
Yeah.
as a lot of adolescent people
Mm-hmm.
do, regardless of what's going on. And um, I started hanging out with some new friends. And I kind of just said goodbye to my old life. It was just sort of like a change. I decided. It's just like I didn't want anything to do with what was happening in my past. I was hanging out with these new
Mm.
friends. Um, we were
Oh,
getting up to
so was it kind of like this is the opportunity to reinvent yourself, new
yes,
school, new friends?
yes,
Ah, I
yes,
see. I
yes.
see.
And I was still very, very spiritual on my own end. But I just wanted to rebel a bit and be distant from
Mm.
that side of me. I was really close to God, and I got to know priests very well. And I thought that maybe as a young child I had a calling to be a priest. I mean, that's how close. Yeah, that's how close I was. Um, so my theory now, looking back, is that maybe um, at 15 it's a lot to take in. Like, oh my God, God is calling me to be a priest. I'm just going to run away from this, and try to run away as much as I can, because I don't want to do that. I'm 15 years old, and I got some advice, I think, from a priest that wasn't um, so wise. And this is my back. This is like me remembering it. It could have been who knows who told me this, how I got it in my brain, but
Mm-hmm.
the saying was, if God wants you to be a priest, like it or not, you will become a priest. So that got in my mind, and it was like, oh my
Interesting.
God,
So
I can't get away.
almost like a yeah, almost like an attack on the free will you've been
Yes.
gifted with.
So I mean, that's how I interpreted. Who knows what was said, but looking
Yeah,
back,
yeah.
that was in my mind. I know. So I
Y-
took the opportunity.
What do you think, looking back, what do you think could have been said to 15-year-old
Mm.
Lucio to continue down that
That's a good
path?
question. Yeah. What I would say, and I've had students in the past, talk, if I thought maybe had a calling,
Mm.
and I would talk to their parents during parent teacher interview night, and I would say, just let this person go through life, making decisions on their own, even if they're bad
Mm.
decisions, and guide them as much as you can. And God will find a way if it is the path for you. And if I was speaking to the student,
Mm.
God will find a way to let you know. And there's no pressure. And God,
Mm.
and this is the advice I got a long time afterward, was that God wants us to be happy no matter what.
Mm.
And so if you
Mhm.
are happy in your vocation, that's the sign that you are doing God's
Mm.
will and your own will.
Mm.
And if you're
Mhm.
miserable doing it, then it's a sign. So follow
Mhm.
your love. That's what I would say. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's yeah, that's interesting. So I actually recently spoke to Father Scott Burchell, who works at the seminary,
Mm,
and he had sort of similar advice
mm,
of just kind of being open and following that path. And something he had said that was really struck me, and I guess both profound and obvious, being Catholics, is like pray on it,
mm,
pray, and a lot of doors will open or close as uh, the Lord sees fit.
mm.
But that's such an important component. Um, well, that's really interesting to know what would have kept you uh, on that path. So instead, you went on this divergent
Yeah.
path. And what did that wandering that desert? What did that look like for you? And where how did your faith feel during that period? Was it gone? Did you feel it suppressed? Like what was that for you during that time?
Yeah, it's hard to describe because there was that peaks and valleys, and I think if you go on that journey alone, which I very much was, you're more prone to that rather than if you have a community and the rituals to support you, and that's the beauty of our faith. But I was definitely
Mhm.
alone, and at a difficult time, at that stage of a life, adolescence. And so,
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
I did I wouldn't call it praying at the time, but I would go on walks by myself. I would listen to music, classical music, and any type of music,
Mm.
that would bring me closer to God. I would write, poetry and journals, and um, even tinker a bit with a piano. And um, that was my way of connecting. But because it was tenuous, there was definitely dips and valleys, um, and my social life with these friends of mine that I now had was not conducive to. We all have free will, and I'm not going to blame my friends on what I did or did not
Mhm.
do. And they're, we're good guys. I'm not going to say that they were totally bad, but they definitely helped
Yeah, yeah.
with my running away, let's say, from where I was, and it
Mm.
was a new identity, like you were saying, and um, it with time it did lead me away. So it's like an incremental, like you could see yourself, like if you see a boat two
Yeah.
degrees off, give it enough time,
Mm.
right? It's like at the end of that it's like
Yeah.
50.
Worlds
Yeah,
away.
so that's kind of where it kind of headed about until 10 years later, and that was then sort of the next big change in my life. So for about 10 years, from the age of 15 to 26, I kind of led that kind of same life, and there's a lot of growing up during that time. And there was peaks and valleys with my faith, but I was definitely not connected to the Catholic Church or my mere spiritual
Yeah.
roots. I was on my own path for sure.
Yeah. Were you attending mass regularly? Was that even disjointed at
Oh
that
yes,
during that stretch
oh yeah,
also?
absolutely.
Okay.
At best, Christmas, Easter. Of course, I was still living at
Mm.
home, and my parents, they were upset. And every now,
Yeah,
yeah,
how did they take that? Because I grew up with
uh-huh,
I have a lot of Italian
yeah.
friends, and I did go to a Catholic high school, although I wasn't practicing, and I can't imagine that conversation went over very
Yeah, no,
well.
I could tell especially my mom, of course, was very upset, and
Yeah,
for the first couple of
yeah.
years, because she noticed it was a drastic change. I mean, from someone who was heavily involved, every Sunday, it was like literally almost overnight. I just stopped going to mass on Sundays, and of course they noticed, um, and they didn't force it too much, and I think that's a good thing, because they respected my path. But every
Mm.
now and then they would say, please, why don't you go? Why don't you go? And every now and then now that I do remember, maybe I would, give them a sort of a present and go and keep them happy.
Mm.
But yeah, it was definitely sporadic. And by the time I was in my 20s, it was probably just a Christmas and Easter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said around 25, 26. You've been wandering the
Mm-hmm.
desert for 10 years at this
Mm-hmm.
point. What was the pivot point? Something
Mm.
dramatic? Was it the same? Was going coming back the same as going out, like a
Yeah. No.
slow maneuver? Like what was that like for you? What brought you back in the fold, so to
Yeah, it
speak?
was very dramatic. It's a on the road to Damascus story, and I remember that day, and it was on one day that it really did change my life.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was Palm Sunday, 1995,
Mm.
and
Mm. Tell
yeah,
me about it.
sure, and
Tell me about it.
so I wasn't going to go to mass, although Palm Sundays is a big deal in my family. It still is. We get together, cousins, aunts, and we have a big meal. Um, but that morning I wasn't going to go. So instead, I went for an early jog. So Sunday morning, springtime, I'm in my neighborhood. Um, I'm jogging through a residential area where there's some houses being built. So it's a construction site, and I'm just running through it, and I noticed there's something a bit strange amongst the rubble. It wasn't a normal looking pile, and I had to really look, very quickly. And as I went closer, I realized, oh my goodness, it's a man. There's a man lying face down on the ground
In the rubble?
in amongst the construction. Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh.
And as I got closer, I realized by the way his body was that this was not a good situation. He was lying face down on the ground. He was an older, I think, Italian man. There was blood coming from his nose and
Oh
his
no.
mouth, but his eyes were closed and he was stiff, and his eyes were really, really gray. Sorry, his flesh color was really, really gray. And
Yeah.
so I, I, I asked, are you okay? Is everything okay? And there's no response. So I get the courage to kind of shake him a little bit, and his eyes open. So I know he's alive. So at this point, I say, please, I literally say, don't die on me. I'm going to get help. And this was before cell phones. So I run to the nearest house. It's still early in the morning. So I, knock on their door. I wake them up, and I say, please, can you call 911? There's a man dying on the street. Um, they give me a blanket, and I go back to the dying man. Um,
What time of year was
uh,
this? Oh, you
Palm
said it's
Sunday.
Palm
Yeah.
Sunday. You said so. It's like so still kind of
Yeah.
chilly depending on how early in the
Exactly.
morning. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
and and this was early. There was no one around that I do remember. So it
Mm,
must have been like maybe 8 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And
mm,
so I'm with the dying man on the street, and we're waiting for the ambulance. And to me, it seems like I'm there for a very long time with this man. I'm sure the ambulance came pretty quickly, but in my eye, I was there for a very long time, and um, I naturally wanted to help this man somehow. I didn't know any CPR. I didn't know what was wrong with him, so I wasn't medically trained. So I thought, it came back to me like, why don't I pray for this man? I was connected all those years. Something just came to me, um, and I tried to pray, but I couldn't. I couldn't.
oh
Yeah,
wow.
I couldn't connect to
Like
God.
like you couldn't find the words, or like I can't even imagine what that is like.
Yes, it's hard to imagine now because we're connected. We have a practice of spirituality and prayer. But
Yeah.
if you can imagine, years of not connecting, it
Mm,
seemed very foreign. And the way I kind of describe it, is our faith is a relationship with God, um, and just picture maybe coming across someone you've dated a long time ago and you completely lost contact with them. Maybe there was a fight and it ended up badly, and then you meet them on the street one day. It's going to feel very strange, awkward, and maybe you just don't want to talk at all, right, to that person.
mm,
I think that's how it kind of felt to me, and it was a huge shock because I wasn't
mm.
expecting that at all. It's like when you drift away, you just sometimes don't realize how much you have drifted away and how much that part of your life is missing, when you really do need it.
Yeah.
And at that
Yeah.
moment, I really did want to, connect with God, and I wanted to pray for this person who's dying literally in front of me. Um, and it really shook me up. It really did. And the ambulance eventually came. They took him away. I find
Mm.
out a couple of days later that the man did die in the hospital of a
Oh,
brain aneurysm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
and it was a
okay.
sort of a sudden. And I find out years later that it was the reason he was there, that his daughter had bought the house that was being built. He was there early that morning just to look over how it was being built, just to see how it was, going. And so at that point, he had this brain aneurysm, and that's the way he passed. Um, so that left me with this emptiness, and I didn't like it. It was a terrible, terrible feeling. And I felt that it was a true fork in the road for me. That somehow this was like my time to choose which path was going, my life was going to go on, because, for the last 10 years, it was one way, and I wasn't happy. I was working in a job I wasn't really happy with. Um, I wasn't happy with my social life. I was just kind of floating and not rooted in anything. And that moment kind of let me see the truth. And it wasn't pretty. And in fact, it took about a month, about a month, maybe 2 months at most, for me to really make a decision about what was to come next, because I had to look
Yeah.
at that real ugly side of my life, and a lot of people don't like to do that. It's tough.
Oh, it's those hard looks are called hard
Yes,
looks for a reason.
right.
Yeah. So you had your in that month of kind of deciding and figuring things out. Where was your prayer life at? Where was your faith at? Like, was this were you wrestling an angel in the desert? Like, what was it looking like for you
Uh,
during that
it
stretch?
got really dark. I can tell you, really dark, um, and to the point of maybe rock bottom, as they say in a lot of people's lives. And it's like, oh my goodness, I was just devastated. And maybe I was too harsh on myself. I don't know, but I couldn't help feeling what I was feeling. And for me, it really was an act of faith. Like, I can remember the day um, where I said, I've got nowhere to go. There's just no way but up from this point. And so that's when I decided, and it was a decision to say, is what I was brought up with the truth or not? So is Jesus real or not? And if he is, I've got to make a decision. I've got to change my life, um, get reconnected. And if he's not, if I am making that decision, I just have to be comfortable with the way things are.
Mm.
So in the end, it came down to that.
Yeah, that's a true crossroads moment. I've had a lot of conversations, and generally I find people it's like this slow build.
Mm,
You're one of the few I feel that I've spoken to where it was like this very defining moment, this very defining choice of it's like I have to take this route or I have to take this path into darkness, and like really sitting with it and weighing with it. So that's a lot.
yes.
That's definitely a lot. And some somebody when I was going through RCI, I remember somebody mentioning the heart of like converts and hearts of reverts. Like there's this something about people who make this very conscious
Yes.
decision, and they kind of get lit. Their
Yes.
heart gets lit
Yes.
afire.
Absolutely.
And was that the
Oof.
case for you? And if it's the case, where did that take you in that immediacy?
It was incredible. Looking back, I'm getting goosebumps. It was just, I was on fire, really. Um,
Mm.
uh, I I started, refamiliar myself with Scripture. I started praying, every night. Um, I started going to Mass every single day, not just on Sundays. And
Yeah,
who
yeah,
goes to
yeah.
Mass on a Tuesday morning in July? A bunch of old Italian ladies and me. So that was kind of weird, this 26-year-old. But I didn't care. And I needed it. I really did.
Yeah,
It was something that was so important to me to climb my way out of that bottom that I was in. It was
yeah.
and it was so beautiful. It was so pure. My faith was just so honest and raw. I went to
Mhm.
confession for the first time in about 10 years. Um, it was very,
How did that feel? How did that feel? Because
yeah,
after, if we have a hard week, confession can be hard too. If you have a hard month or a hard 2 months, confession can be very hard. You had 10 years. You had
yeah.
10 years between them. What was that like, to bring yourself to go to confession, to seek reconciliation? Like, was it a monumental effort? Was there resistance? Like, bring me back to that point.
At that point, I was so committed. I mean, it really was like a full-on 100% commitment at that point.
Mm.
I felt totally the love of God. I had no fear. Um, and because of my background, with the church and with priests, and I knew I had nothing to fear. And sure enough, the priest was unbelievably amazing. It wasn't like he wagged my finger and said, "Where were you for these 10 years?" And it was none of that. And it was just a beautiful experience. And he gave me some prayer cards that I still have right here on my bureau to this day, and I pray the prayer cards. It's been 30 years, and um, I still have them with me. And yeah, it was a nice experience, and that led my way to fully being involved with the sacraments again. And like I said, I was
Oh,
I was going to mass every day.
that's
Um,
beautiful. What at this
yeah.
point, because you had said that you were, doing work that you didn't find fulfilling. After your conversion, is that what got you into teachers college, or was that sort of what precipitated? And why did you choose teaching?
Um, well, it didn't go quite like that. So I
Oh, okay.
I I felt the call to the priesthood
Hmm.
as soon as I committed myself again. And that's the
Really?
path. Yeah, that's the path I went on. So I got involved with Vocation's director and Sarah House and Father Pat O'Day at the time. And I got acquainted with the Office of Catholic Youth, and uh, that was my step back into what am I going to do with my life now, because I did end up leaving my old life, the job I didn't really have, that I didn't like. I let that go. um, I still try to be friends with that group that I had been friends with. It didn't really it really didn't feel comfortable after a while, and I tried to keep the friendship alive, but it didn't end very well with them, and so we kind of parted. But I made new friends and a new social group, and my life was very much on a different direction. And I didn't know exactly, if God was calling me to be a priest, but it was something that was calling me to want to share what was happening in my life with others. And that's the summer too that I started doing street patrol, because I noticed that by the middle of the summer, I had been doing all the things I should be doing. I was going to mass every day. I was confession. I was reading scripture. There was still something missing, and it took me a while to figure it out. And it ended up helping others. Like I'd never really helped anyone in my life before, which is a big part of our faith. And so um, that's where I looked on my parish bulletin board, and I saw a notice from the Office of Catholic Youth saying they do like a sandwich run on Wednesdays. And so that's when I started doing street patrol, and
Hmm.
that opened up a whole other part of my life
Okay.
that was so important to me, and that
Yeah.
I'm still doing today. And so it wasn't something that it
Wasn't a
was something
passing
very.
phase.
No, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
For
and
those who aren't obviously I'm familiar with it. I had a
mm,
chance to go out there with you, and
yes.
we did a short documentary on it also. But for
Yes.
those who aren't familiar with Street Patrol, can you kind of give everybody a bit of a rundown of
Hmm.
what it is, how you live it out, and like who sort of gets involved and who gets served.
Sure. It's a pretty simple concept, actually. We meet on the steps of St. Patrick's Church, downtown Toronto, um, every Wednesday evening in the summer month, July and August. And we walk the streets of Toronto. We hand out food to the homeless, and we try to engage in conversation. And we try to bridge that gap of loneliness that so many homeless people have. And It's a walking prayer for the volunteers. It's a great way to socialize with each other and to be a sort of a walking icon, a living icon in the city. I sometimes see that. You have these 20, 30 people walking the streets and um, giving a bit of life and love to what can be a very hard city. So yeah, that's been a big, big part of my life. And it took it. I started running it actually. I think the summer after that. So that's how we talked about being on fire. I was just on fire.
Yeah,
And I, I must have applied to Teachers College. I really can't remember too well. It's kind of cloudy in my mind
yeah,
because
yeah.
I remember getting accepted. I remember getting the envelope in the mail saying, "Have you been accepted to Teachers College?" And at the time, it was really difficult to get
Mm-hmm.
accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, "Wow, this is incredible." Yeah, and I had a spiritual director at the time, and I asked him, I'm thinking about becoming a priest, as you know, but what do you think? Should I get my degree in teaching? He said, "Sure. If you're going to become a priest, it'll help a great deal."
Mm-hmm.
It was at the University of Windsor, so
Oh, okay.
yeah, it gave me a chance to get out of my normal surroundings and
Mm-hmm.
hang out with some people my own age, live with them for a year, and just sort of spread my wings a bit. And it ended up being one of the best years of my life, and I really enjoyed Windsor, and it was fantastic. That was 97. So I graduated. So I met the dying man on the street in 95. By the end of 97, I was thinking about becoming a priest. I had my teaching degree. I had a whole new group of friends. Um, and I, I started supply teaching when I came back.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Were you
and
still discerning the priesthood at this point?
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I, Again, it was a bit of a miracle that the the school that I loved the most, I was supply teaching the most. The principal called me in and said, like, I've got a job for you if you want it. And
Oh,
it was a dream.
wow.
It was an absolute dream job. When I
Yeah.
say dream job, it was incredible. I was given my own course to teach, unheard of in high school. As far as I
Mm-hmm.
know, no other school had this course.
Mm-hmm. What was
It
the
was
course?
a, it was called Social Justice, and it was a grade 11 religion / co-op course.
That's
So
great.
yeah. So in class, we talked about, the world and why there's so much trouble in the world and why. And in the co-op placement, the kids would go out and try to, make the world a better place. It was a fantastic course, and I
Yeah.
taught it for about 15 years, and it was just so. But I was honest with the principal, and I said,
Yeah.
I'm thinking about becoming a priest. I don't know if I'll
This,
stick around.
I assume this is a Catholic school if you're having that
Yes,
conversation. Okay.
yes, yeah. It was Michael Power of St. Joseph High School, um, and he said, yeah, we just we'd love to have you. Stick. Give me 2 years. Give me 2 years, and after 2 years, if you want to become a priest, you have my blessing. That'd be fantastic. So, what could I say? I agreed, and but I was still discerning. And in fact, it took about, I'd say, 6, 7 years for me to fully discern. It was a long discernment because I just didn't know. Because that thing that saying was still in my mind,
Oh, yeah, yeah. From when you were
about
younger. Absolutely.
yes,
Yeah.
Like you can't hide. God wants you to be a priest, you can't run.
Yeah.
Uh, and I, 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 I was still part of Sarah House. I went to many, many discernment retreats. Um, I did it all,
Mm.
and I was growing. I was growing as a human being. Uh, I felt that a lot of years were lost to me, during those early 20s and
Mm.
my teenage life. And um, frankly, I, I was I was extremely enjoying my teaching career. I was on fire. I mean, I look back now, I can't believe because now I'm close to retirement. But looking
Oh,
back at my early years, I was
yeah.
living at that school. I started about six social justice clubs at that school that are still running today that I'm very
Oh,
proud of.
wow.
Yeah, and it, it was an amazing time for me, and um, and I was also given the opportunity to become head of the religion department. And it was at such a young age to be given that responsibility. It was incredible, but it kind of just shows you what kind of impact I was having on the community. Um, and I started dating, some seriously, and um, it was a really important time in my life. And when it comes to my vocation as a priest, I remember this sort of. I think I outlasted like three vocations directors. So by this time it was, yeah, there was stuff like I was on my third director, and he kind of just said, "Hey, you got to make a decision. You've been doing this for 6 7 years now, and you're not getting any younger, and you wanted the best for me, and just need to
Yeah.
get on with
Yeah.
my life."
Yeah.
Um, and so I went on one final retreat. It was a silent weekend retreat
Mm.
with other men who were discerning, and by the end of that retreat, it was very clear that I was very happy where I was, and it was a gift to work
Mm.
with teenagers that not a lot of people had, and that God wanted me there, and I wanted to be there. So
Mm.
it was a nice relief after
Mm.
all those years of kind
Yeah.
of not knowing.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's a long period to kind of figure things out and wrestling with how to live out one's faith. But it sounds like you definitely found although you didn't take on a vocation in the religious life sense, but you did find your
Hmm.
vocation as a Catholic educator, as planting these great seeds of teaching kids what it means to promote social justice, and coming from like a Catholic social thought sort of version of the word, not necessarily what we see of the world. And things can
Hmm.
get a little moved, a little twisted, but to know that you've planted these little saints along the way, that there's
Yeah,
got to be a sense of satisfaction in that, not
yeah,
pride, but
definitely.
like just joy. Like there must be a sense of joy about what you've been able to accomplish with the youth over all this time.
Yeah, it was fantastic opportunity, and it was a privilege, to be in that community of young people. And as a priest, there would have been another community I would have been involved with, and it wouldn't be necessarily youth 24/7. And so for me, and it's funny, the grade that I most like to teach is that grade 10 year at 15, because that was the year I kind of said goodbye. So for whatever reason, that's the grade that I've taught the most, and that's the grade I love teaching, and I kind of really resonate with that age. And I know I do my best to be, a role model. I'm not perfect, but I do my best, and it's been a fantastic career,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I really enjoyed myself.
Yeah, you said you're near the end. Are you like, do you have a set time you're gonna retire? Do you have like, is that like a ways away? Because frankly, you seem ageless. The fact that you even mentioned retirement kind of
I know,
blew my
I know,
socks off.
I know,
So,
I know, I know. It blows my socks off too. But I officially can retire in a year and a half. So that's
oh
like the official
wow,
date.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But you don't have
Now
to. You don't
I
have
don't
to.
have to.
Okay.
No. So I'm open to whatever God wants. So this is an interesting time to be talking with me because I'm sort of at a crossroads where I'm open to what God wants me to do. And so I'm kind of discerning that at the moment, um, because there are other opportunities. There may be other places where God wants me. At this point, I'm not 100% sure.
Hmm.
But I'll pray about it, and I'm sure God will let me know
Yeah.
in due time. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And there's something that I found very interesting in our conversation. In different pockets of your life, it's been
Mm,
community that's really impacted you. Whether you were an altar server, you had a community. When you stepped away, you had a different type of
mm,
community. And like even as you've come back, gone to Windsor, formed a new community that set
yeah.
that sort of trajectory. As you move towards this next phase, do you feel that there's a new set of community, not to leave the one that you've built behind, but is there a new set of community to engage with to help facilitate that? Um, is this new c- potential community is that, do you feel that some in your faith, because it's you've been lit a fire, so I'm curious to know as you
Mm,
move along this trajectory, are they smoldering embers, or do we still have a
ah,
big flaming sequoias in your heart right now?
uh, well, that's a great question. It's hard to answer because it kind of ebbs and flows. I because it is so at this point unknown. You know,
Mm,
I, I feel like I I still have a lot to contribute. And I think God can really use me as a tool. But honestly, I'm at that stage where I'm really searching, and God will reveal it to me
mm-hmm,
eventually. I know He will.
mm-hmm.
But uh, it's that point where I just don't know. I mean,
Yeah,
technology has opened up a whole new path, I'm sure you're discovering.
yeah.
You're reaching people through this medium, and
Mm-hmm,
um, uh, who knows, maybe that's a path for me.
mm-hmm,
I'm single at this point,
mm-hmm,
so I never did get married.
mm.
So it's could be marriage. It's never
Yeah,
too
yeah.
late. Uh,
Never.
yeah, um, it could it could be anything at this point. So that's kind of why it's exciting. It's kind of scary, but
Yeah.
it's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and honestly, I do hear that. I don't necessarily hear fear or even hesitancy in you. I hear that openness and that hear of like, okay, God, what do you have for me? It really, when I worked at Salt and Light, I had the great pleasure of producing Lectio Divina with Cardinal Collins, and he would often, when he was doing a couple of them, he would often say it's like, God, your servant is listening, your servant is listening,
Mm,
and you really strike me as the embodiment of that. Like I don't come across that too often, and
wow. Wow.
that's very inspiring, I have to say, because I know I run around like a chicken with his head cut off sometimes, so to see somebody
Well,
really emulating that, that's very inspiring and powerful.
I really
You yeah.
appreciate that.
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
there's a secret sauce to my piece that
Oh.
I may want to talk about because um, the dying man on the street
Mm.
changed my life. I consider it a miracle, but another miracle did happen to me, and it leads it led me to this peace that
Mm.
I have. So I'm willing to share that other miracle story if you're
I,
willing to listen.
I'm all ears. Please, honestly, please do. 'Cause I find often people will look past the miraculous or look past a lot of things and just not pay attention. So the fact that
Ah,
you've experienced this and it's planted a seed in your heart, like, please do.
okay. Well, it happened in 2008. So I had been teaching for about 8, 9 years at that point. Um, I had decided not to be a priest, that I was happy. So it was after that decision. I had been dating someone very, very seriously. It didn't work out. So I was kind of in that stage of being a bit heartbroken and not knowing, what to do next. And I was on a retreat with my grade 10 class. And we were at a school for uh, young adults who were challenged. So, those students who graduate from high school that are in special ed and they don't know what to do afterwards. It was basically a school how to navigate life, how to do the basics, get a job, do laundry, how to cook. Um, and so the idea was that my grade 10 class would mingle with these students and help them and just spend a day in this facility. Um, and so the facilitator was a very special person. Um, she said she was called to do this type of work, um, and I don't have the permission to tell her story, so
Yeah, yeah.
I'll just call her. Let's call her Mary. And
It's a
so
good name.
Mary was, yeah, that's just, and so, but she was a very, very special woman. Like you could tell right away, how she introduced the day to us, and very, very spiritual. And this particular school was located near a Marian shrine,
Okay.
which is well known to a community in Etobicoke, um, uh, and there were uh, stories of miracles happening on the site. Um, so we were. It was a special day. You could feel it in the air. But the day went on. It was lunchtime, and I was just minding my own business. My students were having their lunch. I was just wandering the hallways, and the Mary came up to me and said, I don't know how to say this, but I just got a message from God. He wants me to pray with you. Right? Are you okay with that? So sure, I don't mind praying with you. Sure, I got nothing else to do. Um, so we went to the chapel. So this used to be a Catholic high school, and it was sort of remodeled into to be this facility, but they still had a functioning chapel,
Mhm.
Catholic chapel, and on Sundays, I think an ethnic congregation would use this chapel as their parish. So we went to the chapel. Of course, it was empty. But before we started to pray, she sat me down and she said, I've got these messages from God, and He wants you to know these certain things about your life and about some advice on where it's going and what has happened in the past. So these are things that no one knew about me, very private things. So she got my attention when she started listing these things, and they really did resonate with me. And I thought, okay, something really interesting is happening here. And I also at this time too, someone else knocked on the door of the chapel from the outside and asked, "Are you free today?" And she said, "No, no, I'm with this gentleman today. Come back tomorrow." So I got a sense that she was known amongst the community as a guide, as a spiritual healer. So again, she earned more of my trust, after these incidences. So we go to the front of the chapel and we kneel. and she's to my left, and I'm to her right, and she grabs hold of my hand, and we're praying, and my eyes are closed, and I lose track of time. I'm not saying anything in particular. I'm just quietly meditating, just emptying my mind. And after a while, I hear her say, "Oh my goodness, do you see him?" And I couldn't believe she had said that, because for I don't know how long I had been seeing Jesus in front of me. It was a full operation.
Mm.
He was larger than life. Um, I could see his torso. I really didn't make out his limbs, but I saw his face. Um, Typical image of Jesus. He had long hair, the beard. He looked a bit older than I would have thought. When I think back, I think of the Shroud of Turin. So that was kind of the image that I
Yeah.
was seeing. Um, Lines on his face, a bit darker in complexion than I would have thought, older than I would have thought. Um, and his eyes were sparkling. I don't want to say blue, but just light, like light, pure light coming from his eyes. And the smile was just so beautiful. Um, and she kept saying to me, "You are so blessed. You are so blessed." And I wasn't just seeing Jesus. It was more, way more than just a sight. It was a feeling. And it was a feeling of being completely loved, overwhelming love, completely non-judgmental. I felt every particle of my being being loved. And of course, I've been loved by my mother and my family and others, but this was a love beyond belief. In fact, it was almost painful. I couldn't hold on to that love. It was just, when I say overwhelming, I can't even imagine another word for it. And I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want Jesus to say anything. I was just completely overwhelmed by this love, and I just wanted to stay in that love. And he had this beautiful, beautiful smile, and I had this feeling of like, hey, everything's going to be okay, and you are completely and fully loved. Um, and I don't know how long it lasted. Um, when I say it was painful, my heart was it was very hard to hold on to that love. It was almost uncomfortable, maybe that feeling, of course, of not deserving that love. It came to me, but and my friend Mary, she was seeing the same thing, because she kept saying, "You are so blessed. You are so blessed." And all this time, my eyes are closed, and
Mm-hmm.
tears are coming down my face.
Yeah. And you're not
But it
not describing what you're seeing at this point. You're just like experiencing it.
just experiencing it, and it, it's I it's if my eyes were open, though. I could see
Yeah.
the altar, I
Yeah.
could see the glass stain. I could it was, but I knew my eyes were closed. Um, and that's why when I remember this, that's why I close my eyes, because that's how I remember it.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I remember how it ended, because as a teacher, I was thinking, how long have I been here? My students are unsupervised. Oh my goodness, I better get back to them,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I remember I was the one who broke off the contact with my friend,
Mm-hmm.
and I opened up my eyes, of course, and then the vision was gone, and it was just, oof, it was the greatest, the most incredible thing that has ever happened to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Uh, how like to experience something like that, and for somebody next to you to see what you're saying, and you not have an utterance to even let her know that that is
No.
beyond anything I can imagine. Like how do you unplug, so to speak, from that to go and navigate with your students? Like what was that experience like? Were you able to bring that joy, that love with you? Was it like what was in that immediacy? What were you
Uh-huh.
feeling?
I was bursting for sure. I remember hugging her and just being overwhelmed with joy. Um, Obviously, I couldn't tell my students. It was just beyond
Yeah.
telling at that point.
Yeah.
I definitely need to process this. Um, I did need to tell, I had to tell someone. So it was a former girlfriend of mine actually um, that I contacted, and that's the first person I talked to that night. Um, and she was the only one I told the story to for I think over a year. Um, yeah, I couldn't, I really couldn't, I couldn't process this, um, and it took a long time actually. Um, here's the crazy part. So this is kind of tells you how it's so unpredictable these experiences are, and how someone reacts to them. So I had to go back to this facility with my other grade 10 class about, I think, a couple months later.
Mm.
And Mary was there, of course. Um, and she cornered me again. And she said, I would like to pray with you again. And I said, no.
Really?
I
Why?
said, no.
Why?
At the time, I, I was full. That's the only
Mm.
expression I just was full. Now it's been what, over 15 years. Of course, I regret that in a way,
Mm.
because who knows what else could have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, it was the only thing I could do, and maybe I was a bit afraid as well, um, of what something like that, maybe in my own human mind, God is asking me to change even more, and maybe I wasn't open or at the time able to change.
Mm.
Um, but it's interesting. Yeah, it took, I think, about 5, 6, 7 years before I started telling other people and
Mm.
processing it, and fully accepting what had happened to me. It's really interesting. Like you would think a vision like that, I would become like a hermit monk and become,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
knows? But no, my life just continued
Mm.
as it was.
Yeah.
As far as I know, I didn't change that much. Um, but I did notice a change once I started processing it, and my heart has opened up, a lot since then. I've been through a lot of um, modalities, I guess, to open up my heart more and to be able to accept more love in my heart. Um, and so that, I think that had something to do with it. But it has definitely, like, this is something I cannot deny. In a way, I don't have faith in Jesus anymore. Like, I just know, like, there's a knowing there. If you get my meaning, um, like, I just know, and I have no fear of death whatsoever. Um, I have complete, like you mentioned, this complete sense of trust. Um, that's the real legacy of this vision for me. That it's extreme, blessing, and I don't know why. Obviously, whenever these things happens to people, why me? You know, um, I was going through a bit of a breakup, a heartbreak, from a breakup, but so what? So many others have gone through probably even more. But for whatever reason, as Mary had said, I was really blessed. And why that day? Like it's probably like an ordinary Tuesday. Not so
Wow.
ordinary though.
Definitely not ordinary. No, I firstly thank you for sharing that. To share that intimate experience, I appreciate that, and that's something a lot of people can learn from, of taking the time to pray, and who knows what will be gifted to them during that
Mm,
time of prayer. And also, even in that moment where you said no, and because
mm,
that two part of like feeling full, but now 15 years later you're like, maybe I should have gone. That's
mm,
even that's a bit of a piece for people, because 15 years separated, and maybe a viewer or listener, you know, they could say, "Oh, I would have done that." Well, would you
uh-huh,
have? Would you have? It's very easy to armchair quarterback, or in this case, armchair prayer warrior.
yeah,
It's We'll all be we called and tested and asked of in different a lot of different ways in our faith journey, and that's actually that's one of the big things for the personal vocation, is for
mm,
people to learn about the gifts that they have, and be inspired to use them, and not be I don't want to say to be afraid, but to be to be like Mary, to be ready to say yes. And
yeah.
that's difficult, and I have no judgment on that.
You know, as I do get older, I think things have become simpler for me. Um, I stick to the basics. I have a big quote on my blackboard. God is love. That's my favorite quote in the Bible. It's my motto. And Jesus is the incarnation of that love. And I've been lucky enough to see and feel that love in this earthly plane. And, I'll be forever grateful for that. Um, and it's for me, that is the foundation, and it's given me so much peace. And like I was saying, with that, after the end of that vision, I just was full. And I think that fullness, even though you want more and more, it's just human nature. And goodness me, to feel that love fully again, I'm truly looking forward to that. I know I do feel the love of Jesus, but a miracle is a miracle for a reason. It's extremely rare. It's a beautiful gift. But I have experienced it, and when you reimagine or rethink an experience, um, it they call it. I just heard this today. It's called priming, and you kind of relive those experiences in your brain, and it kind of resets everything. So every time I do experience, a little part of me, is back there and in that chapel, and my heart is alive, and Jesus is always here with us. I mean, that's a given. Um, it's how we respond to that that's makes it so special. Um, and so whatever is next, and I'm so grateful for what my life has been so far. There has been ups and downs, it's like with any life. But
Mm.
I've been really blessed in that special relationship that was there when I was very young, and I'm really happy that it's kind of back, and it's been back. It's been next year it'll be 30 years. So I met the dying
Oh,
man in
wow.
1995. So next year it'll be my 30th year anniversary. So it's been a wild ride. 30 years. It's been amazing.
That's incredible. That's incredible. That's incredible. For those who are kind of trying to figure out their way, maybe some are in the middle of their 10-year gap.
Mm.
Maybe some have just had an experience, and they're trying to figure out, okay, what next? What do you want from me, God? What do you have for me? What advice can you offer for them as they try to seek out and find their own personal vocation, how they could live that out?
First of all, to trust in God, and trust in the process. And if you're able, is to meet God halfway. So opening up yourself to the invitation is the first part. Because what I forgot to mention in my story is that a good friend of mine, when I was 21, died of a brain aneurysm, the same way that the dying man did. And my life did not change at all. And I have a photo of, I just so happened to have a photo of my friend and a group of guys from my high school graduation mass. And it's on my desk. And it reminds me that, you know, he was taken at such a young age. He was such a beautiful young man. You know, I'm sure he is in heaven. But it wasn't the time for me. I think God was knocking at my door, and I said no. But 5 years later, a complete stranger meets me, and that changes my life. So I was ready at that time, and I met God halfway. I did the steps, and then to reach out, you know, to go to mass and to reacquaint myself with the sacraments and read scripture and to help, you know, those less fortunate. And God amplified those steps a million times, you know, 100, you know, a million times more. So yeah, for those who are at that point, trust God, do what you can, and God will be there, and the end result will surprise you for sure, because God is wondrous, and you just never know where God will lead you. For truly,
Yeah.
I would never have believed if you would have stopped me when I was 18 and said this is going to be my life. I wouldn't have believed you, because at that point my life was a totally different direction, and it's amazing what God can do.
That's that that's beautiful. Thank you so much, Lucio, for sharing all your gifts, all your wisdom, and your experiences with us. And you know, just we'll continue to pray for the good work that you do. And I'll share a link for so people can reach out and connect if they want to get out there and serve
Yes,
some sandwiches
absolutely.
with
Yeah.
Street Patrol with
Our
summertime around the
Yes,
corner.
it'll be our
And
29th edition this summer.
oh, that's
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, thank you so much for everything, Lucio. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, Jermaine. Thank you, and God bless everyone. And God is love, and thank you very much. Really appreciate it.